You're watching The New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more information and articles about at-scale technologies, please visit thenewstack.io. Now enjoy the show.
Recent decades delivered great advances in infrastructure. Now it's time to build apps that make the most of those new tools. VMware Tanzu platform accelerates the app development and delivery processes with streamlined paths to production, automation, and enhanced cost, performance, and security.
Well, I've been looking forward to this discussion for a few weeks now. And the person who I'm with is James Waters. He's Senior Director, R&D, Tanzu Division at Broadcom. And James and I have had similar pathways in the technology world. He's been on the software side, I've been on the media side, but there's been many convergences along the way. We were talking about the early days of platform as a service, kind of like the Wild West of pre-cloud native, maybe we could call it, right? Before cloud native was cloud native, it was Cloud Foundry. And there was so much interesting time. There was so much to talk about during that time. I remember going to the VMware campus when Cloud Foundry got introduced.
Yeah.
And there was just such an energy there. And then that led to a whole shift in the VMware organization and EMC, and then resulting in Pivotal. And that's been, I think, in many respects, your legacy is like Pivotal, right? And now Pivotal got acquired by VMware. And now VMware is part of Broadcom. And here you are leading basically the cloud native approach that VMware is taking. That's there's a lot that's happened in between there, but it seems like it's still emerging.
Yeah, Alex, it's great to look forward, but also reminisce with you a little bit. Like we were saying before this, we've both been on this path for a little over a decade, seeing this kind of phenomenal change in the industry in terms of how we approach what applications are, how they should run. In the simplest terms, there was that big change over the last decade, and yeah, it's been really fun to be at a well-funded R&D organization like VMware, then Pivotal.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, the luck I've had is just kind of working with great engineers with big ideas and just kind of being part of that team and over the years. So, and working with the extended colleagues in the industry, you know, et cetera. So it's been a great journey, and it's great to see the new stack kind of take over that whole part of the industry as well over these years. So congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Great to connect today.
Yeah, really great to connect. And we're talking about VMware State of Cloud Native Platform research that you did.
Yeah.
And it goes into some interesting findings. Looking at the value that Cloud Native provides, how companies are mitigating their risks, how app diversity is getting supported, and how patterns are trying to be simplified in many ways. I'm curious what are some of your core takeaways from this report. This is a report you've been doing since 2020.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear some of your key takeaways and what you think are some of the summary findings.
Yeah, I think the number one thing for me that stands out both in this report as well as my industry conversations, customer conversations, is sort of the idea that we're entering a phase of cloud native that you might think of as an application-centric consolidation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you see a lot of people talking about this term that New Stack has covered well, golden paths.
Yes.
And I think things are getting more application-centric. And the idea is if we can have fewer application patterns, we can make everyone's life simpler. We can make security's life simpler. Yeah. We can make infrastructure life simpler, and we can make the developer's life simpler.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways, the macroeconomic climate of the growth era versus our current, a little bit more efficiency-focused era helps that. And so I think one of the top findings was just 55% of organizations wanting to adopt that golden path approach. And then the other one that was right there was similar, is like, this similar percentage wanting to adopt, platforms that gave them greater compliance and security out of the box. And I think those two things go together. If you just think about when we all went through Log4j not too long ago,
mm-hmm.
suddenly the question every CIO is asking is like, where are all these log4j's? What is log4j? How do we fix all of these? And that's really an application-centric security issue. And I think people are trying to get better at exercising that muscle.
Yeah, and I would add on that
Yeah.
that with applications we see APIs, and the APIs have proliferated to the point where, establishing any kind of physical wall around you is pretty much impossible now, right? You have to have some ability to protect deep into the network itself, because if for instance, if an API might be calling credit card from in any different number of ways, and that to me seems reflected in this report, where there's like this real need for security. I'm curious in particular how you would see that reflected in how companies are thinking about mitigating security risks.
Yeah, I mean, if you just take a step back, it used to be a world, maybe when we all started thinking about this stuff in the early 2010s, where you had very few external APIs, monolithic applications, and everyone would turn to like network-based outer perimeter security. So everything that was happening was very back-end focused, and very few things would come and go from your enterprise. Like you might have a couple of applications. And I think, as you pointed out, like that API first mentality has really become important in the industry, right? And so the idea that you're just going to hope that your network provides all the security that you need is no longer sufficient. And I think we're seeing more and more teams starting with kind of an API first app model, right? So even internally, they're saying, how do we use things like in our platform, kind of the Tanzu gateway, the Spring API gateway, to be like, let's build authentication right into the app from the start and build that API first pattern. So I think that's all part of getting more app versus infrastructure centric as an industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a great point, and something we see, as we'll get to maybe later, accelerating even more. If you think about the world of like AI and agents and everything's being called by, everything's being called and exposed as an API, you can imagine over the next 10 years how that's going to accelerate.
Yeah, in multiple different kinds of ways. So before we get any deeper and into kind of some of the other key findings, I mean, there's the value that's being delivered. There's trends around APIs we just mentioned. There's platform proliferation that we're seeing. There's the real balance of consistency and flexibility. But before we get too deep into that, tell us about what VMware is doing under Broadcom with the Tanzu platform. I'd love to hear more about where the Tanzu platform is right now.
Yeah, it's a great question, Alex. I'm actually sitting here in the building where Cloud Foundry was actually originally launched in 2011. I sit across from the major conference room we launched it in. So I don't know if that's just cosmic circularity or what that is, but sometimes you just kind of shake your head at it. But I think, where we are today is, we, in some ways, it used to be almost a option. Like, do you want a platform, app-centric platform, or do you want an infrastructure-centric platform? But I think the things that you've seen in this report have helped us evolve our thinking. And what we really offer now is a consistent set of what we're calling like these golden operations. And we think whether you're consuming a Cloud Foundry platform or a Kubernetes-based platform, enterprises, in order to achieve golden path-like consistency, they need a consistent way of building things, deploying them to a cluster, scaling them, adding logging to them, et cetera. And we think enterprises can standardize in these 5 or 10 commands across all their apps. And that's something that is very central to our work on Tanzu platform today, which is that let's take all of the best practices that we've seen over the last decade and make them consistent however you want to run your apps. And I think that's our big idea. And I think we're really helped in our conversations in the market because that other fact you saw where sometimes DIY is taking, a year to 2 years to complete.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our buyer, our customer is really excited about, having better out of the box developer experience, operational consistency, and security. So that's really central to Tanzu platform right now is sort of like choice of infrastructure, but consistency of operations.
So self-service becomes a part of that.
That's right. And I think the question, Alex, is sort of like in our industry, what is self-service? Is that where we started, where it's like Docker on your laptop? That was sort of like, hey, that was the original freedom. And then I think there was a period of experimentation where every project got their own Kubernetes cluster. And if you push into that, that leaves a lot on that dev team to figure out. And so I think there's a higher level of self-service required to move with speed and to not spend years building a DIY platform on top of it. And so we've turned self-service into a build command, a deploy command, a scale command, a logging command, and a bind to a route command. And we've just seen organizations that are either regulated, care about security, or care about efficiency. Like that's really resonated with them in 2024.
So how are you seeing organizations get benefits from cloud native ecosystems? What are some of the values that you're seeing them attain? I did see in the report that 65% report seeing at least one direct financial benefit, 70% report IT operators are more efficient, and 64% of developers are more productive. So those seem like very good. Those are numbers, but I'm curious if there's any data behind the numbers that you can help us illustrate what these numbers mean.
Yeah, I think if you think of those golden operations I just mentioned, let me just give you two really huge impacts. One is you tend to see a 2 to 20x increase immediately in the number of times that developers feel comfortable deploying to production or to staging. And this is one of my favorite things to observe because you work in our industry and after a while, there's just a lot of terms coming up, like a lot of trends. Like how do you distill that down? And just, the DORA metrics that have emerged around how often you're able to deploy safely to production. To me, that's like one of the ultimate tests of a developer and a unified platform for cloud native. And so we just see organizations adopting these patterns. They immediately get 5 to 10x improvements in that developer deployment speed. The other one, though, that's really happened, I'd say in the last couple of years, though, is people are benchmarking the availability and operability of a full do-it-yourself approach versus a little bit more of an out-the-box platform. We had one large regulated, organization where when you're a regulated bank and you have downtime, like that's a major deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, they really stepped on the pedal of adopting more of Tanzu platform because, there was a period of years where there really wasn't an outage or downtime, noticeable downtime on the turnkey platform. And I think that really gets back to the idea of the more structure you have in the way you build apps and run and operate them, you have a little bit more certainty about how each independent app is configured and ready to go. And we've just seen a very strong, benefits of resiliency in terms of this adoption of these patterns. Those are two big ones I'd pick on.
They still recognize security and governance as their top challenges. What do they say about those challenges that they face?
To me, security is, if I had a third, I would have picked that. And it might be the number one, but I kind of don't want to just keep saying security. To me, that is the number one driver of golden paths is the idea that you need consistent security across all these apps. Imagine you have 5,000 apps, and a lot of them really are just Java and Postgres apps, but they're not consistently built, and the Postgres is not consistently provisioned and bound to those apps. And so when you have any bug that comes out across that portfolio, you're kind of treating them all independently. And so we're building an enhanced UX in, the Tanzu platform that shows you the layers of your application and any security vulnerabilities they'll have. but it allows you to consistently use something like a Spring Boot and a Postgres in every one of them, so that when you go to fix them, you're doing fleet management, right? You're really thinking about the fleet of that pattern, not about, 300 projects, each with their own, security alerts. I think there was a phase in DevSecOps where it was like, hey, just introduce a scanner. But that doesn't necessarily make sure that their standardization is happening across the apps, right? That can get very noisy. I'm not sure if you've seen that too, like scanning noise and like CVE noise.
Yeah.
It's a big problem.
Yeah. And it goes much deeper than that.
Yeah.
So this brings up kind of like, I think of these things hand in hand with platform proliferation.
Yeah.
And and then this speaks then to me the need for platform engineering and better platform management. And your report says 72% of organizations are using multiple cloud native application platforms, which speaks to this. 26% run 2 platforms, 27% run 3 platforms, and 19% run 4 or more. That's amazing to me. And now, of course, there's a lot of companies using cloud provider managed services, but there's still a lot of custom built solutions out there. How do these things fit? How does the security mitigation and the governance issue, the risk mitigation and security issues, and the plus application diversity, which you've been talking about, application-centric capabilities, fit with this platform proliferation and this platform management that's needed?
Yeah, I think the data you just highlighted is really critical to the current strategy of Tanzu platform today and why it's working for customers. The number one thing people are turning to is the managed service on the cloud of their choice. So on Amazon, it might be an EKS. On Azure, it might be an AKS. And on the VMware private cloud stack, it's the Tanzu Kubernetes grid baked into VCF. And so the real goal of the Tanzu platform then above that is to enable golden paths across all of those managed environments, because that's really the gap that's left. I think the beginning of this self-service, focus for developers was, hey, here's your cluster, go. Maybe a scanning tool. And I think what we're seeing, led by Spotify's adoption of golden paths for Spring Boot, a Tanzu technology, is like, hey, actually, we need to bring that golden path mindset much higher than a self-service cluster. We need to bring this up into application-centric documentation, application-centric security, and application-centric, automation. And so that's really what Tanzu platform is helping people do, is adopt those managed services, as you said, but then consolidate it down to really less platforms that they need to get their jobs done, because they don't have to have a different platform for the AKS and the on-prem, Kubernetes managed service on VCF.
Okay. One of the other, findings that I saw in the report is the value, again, from cloud native applications. And it just seems like cloud native is here to stay, but I'm curious, where does it go from here? What do you see as, the next generation of Tanzu, of Tanzu in the cloud native ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, we're always doing research to find out, but obviously, everyone's looking at these, kind of autoregressive large language models, and how that changes, our user interfaces, the way we access data, et cetera, across our apps. And I really like the OpenAI announcement the other day of their, cheaper, faster model. And they said, we really want to bring AI to every application. And I think that's probably a pretty good bet for platform engineering teams over the next 3 to 5 years as well. And another example of that happening in industry, before we even get to platform engineering, you and I were chatting about, is like Postgres.
Yes.
Created in 1997, but Michael Stonebreaker has a great paper out recently where he talks about all these trends that Postgres has added to itself. And the big one right now is PG vector. So you can do approximate nearest neighbor like, similarity searches for embeddings right within Postgres. And I think that Postgres mentality is the same as cloud native needs to have, which is there's this big new trends around AI driven applications. we don't want to reinvent how we run containers and bring availability applications to do that. We want to evolve those platforms to add things like token rate limiting directly into the platform. We want to allow that RAG application pattern to be immediately accessible in our golden paths. And that's really what we're driving as our next generation of research in Tanzu is, how can we work to bring, that intelligence to every application that runs on the platform over the next 5 years. I think that's the right focus today. And it also helps you really be thoughtful about where your innovation budget is, right? Should you keep reinventing how to start and stop a container? You should start to get into let's do token rate limiting for the platform.
And then Java, Java's been around for a long time, clearly. And what is its place? I mean, we're talking about, honored legacy technologies.
Yeah. I mean, I think, as we know, Kubernetes now over a decade old, Postgres 1997, Java similar age, in its current machination as Postgres. And I think there's something to admire about these technology ecosystems that continue to add that next interface because they allow themselves to retain the network effects they already had. Like they're already good at all of those other things, and now they add that next trick. And I think Java has surprised people by continuing to adapt, and we're seeing rapid adoption of Spring AI right now. In the same way that, frankly, when microservices came out, people thought that might be it for Java, because Java before that had been designed for very large scale, Sun Microsystems machines at the time. And it adapted with technologies like Spring Boot, inspired by Drop Wizard from the ecosystem, to be, I would say, the number one way enterprises build microservices today. And I think there's an opportunity for intelligent applications to, access these LLMs as APIs and not to have everything in one co-located monolith in Python. And so you can now bring the intelligence of that LLM right into every Java app that you're running as an API. And that's really, kind of consuming, OpenAI's models, as well as all these great models that are coming out every day through Spring is a big focus for us with Spring AI.
That really opens up a whole new set of challenges too, around just how do you limit access to an API but let it still have access? For instance, if there's, if you're accessing, for instance, data that might include, an LLM. So what are the challenges you see coming ahead in the cloud native ecosystem as it relates to that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think what you said is right, which is that data privacy starts with data control for a lot of our customers. And there's a very strong demand to run kind of more of a private model approach in enterprises. And they want to have their own model that they're running, exactly as they've certified it, co-located with their data. And there's a whole new set of safety challenges, from monitoring quality of responses, in addition to data privacy, allowing certain teams to access this model as an API or not. So there's a whole set of governance and safety issues that now with Spring AI and Tanzu, I think we're going to try to bring to platform engineering teams out of the box. And one that I'd close on is it's a very fast-moving market too. And so people also want model choice. And probably the number one thing, platform engineering teams are saying to us is that they would like to be the layer of indirection between, say, a publicly hosted model for dev. And then when you go to production or you scale that, you want to be able to bring that to a privately hosted model. So we're seeing, people ask the platform engineering team to be really that level of indirection around those, intelligent APIs. So I think that's an exciting new set of challenges. And frankly, I spend my evenings learning about all of this stuff every day in an invigorating way.
Well, James, thank you so much for taking some time to talk about the report and about VMware Tanzu and the overall ecosystem out there. I attended the 10th anniversary of Kubernetes, and one thing that became clear to me is Kubernetes may be 10 years old, but there's another 10 years plus to go with cloud native ecosystems and AI. And I think our conversation really speaks to that. So James, thank you very much for your time in our discussions, and we'll post a link to the report in the show notes.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Appreciate the conversation, and looking forward to a second decade in cloud native with you and the rest of the crew. Thank you.
Thank you. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.